This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Easthampton City Council Finance Committee meeting. It's 5:30 on May 8th. We have a whole bunch of appropriations that we want to consider this evening. But before we do that, do we have any minutes? Okay. Mayor's communication. Okay. Public speak. Anyone from the public want to weigh in on anything? Okay. No new business, so let's get straight into the supplemental appropriation. And I'm just going to go down the list does anybody have any reason why it's really important to them that they go earlier or later? Oh, okay, great. The first one up is a $197,050 appropriation for fire personnel services, medical, uniforms, equipment, and education. I see that our fire chief, Chief Norris, is on Google Meets. So, Chief, would you like to sort of introduce this one for us?
Sure, absolutely. How's my audio coming through? Okay.
It's great. Thanks.
Very loud.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, so as Councilor Peak mentioned, the first appropriation on the fire department is for $197,050, and that request will basically get us through the end of the year. The big chunk of it comes from overtime. Typically, when you look back over the last 5 years, the fire department typically spends anywhere from $220,000 to $235,000 a year for overtime, and that's the overtime that is incurred for the shift coverage. Contractually, I have to have 5 people on duty all the time to staff all the emergency vehicles. So that's the most of that request. The full-time supervisory and full-time clerical, that will bring us whole for all of those contractual obligations for the clerical, the fire chief position, and the deputy chief position. And just as an aside, when this current fiscal year's budget was developed and approved, those contracts were not finalized yet, and that's why the need for the request there. The captain's grade at $20,500, that is when you have a firefighter that works out of grade as a captain, and that was higher than normal this year because we had, for an extended period of time, that time being about 4 to 5 months, one captain was out with a serious medical condition, and that required a firefighter to fill that spot working out of grade as the captain. And then the fire medical and uniforms, those are for new employees that we're in the process of hiring, as well as the equipment one, the fire equipment. The majority of that is to purchase new firefighter protective clothing for the five new firefighters that are being onboarded. And then the other half of that amount, around $23,000, is for the annual service on all the equipment, the hoses, the ladders, the aerial truck, the extinguishers, things of that nature. And then the last one there, fire education and training, that's our contractual requirement for reimbursement for personnel obtaining higher degrees of education in college. So I'll pause there and certainly entertain any questions that people may have.
Councilors, do you have any questions?
Something that I spoke to Chief Norris already addressed a lot of this.
Okay, great.
Clear.
I suppose I don't really either. We really get something like this at the end of the year. Most years, that makes sense to me. That looks like most of this is other than the overtime, which I've opined about before. But other than that, I think most of the stuff here looks like it's stuff that we couldn't have necessarily anticipated at the point we made the budget. So it makes sense why that's coming to us now. I would entertain a motion to recommend this to the full council?
So moved.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes 3-0. That's the first one. The next one we have up is a $60,500 appropriation. This one covers ambulance overtime emergency, $14,500, ambulance services, $30,000, and miscellaneous technical services, $16,000. Chief, you want to walk us through this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the overtime on the EMS budget, that one there is driven by callbacks, both contractually when we go to Westhampton, based on that 3-year agreement. Anytime the ambulance goes to Westhampton, we have protocols set in place in dispatch that after they turn out the ambulance, 2 people get called back for coverage to backfill and supplement our on-duty staffing for the city of Easthampton. And then in addition to that, in that same line item, when we go to hospitals out of our service zone, so your Bay States, your Mercy Medical Centers, Bay State being the most prevalent one, being our trauma center, when those ambulance goes down there, they're gone for, on average, 90 minutes or more, based on the severity, the distance, and the turnaround time. So there's procedures in place to backfill and call back to for those as well. So that's what the $14,500 would cover. The $30,000 in supplies, this is needed basically to get us through what I term as disposable supplies. Each year, we typically spend upwards of $60,000 to $70,000 in supplies. And ever since COVID, we've talked a lot about COVID. People are well aware, unfortunately, that the dramatic increase in prices have still held in the medical field. So certainly that's what that would go for in terms of those disposable supplies. And then the last one is the miscellaneous and technical services for $16,000. I always tell people that it's always difficult to come back and ask for more money, but in this case here, that line item goes towards our third-party billing agency, and they collect 2.99% of what they charge us, 2.99% for what we collect. Right now, based on our projections for this fiscal year, we're going to be right around $1.5 million in collections that go into the general fund. So that money will get us towards the end of the year to pay the third-party billing agency for those services. And I'll pause there for any questions.
Councilor Denham.
Chief Norris, this is Connie Denham, Councilor Denham. Just a quick question, and it just caught me because you gave the amount of time. So is there a specific amount of time that is covered for callback when they are compensated, or is it for the amount of time that they are in the firehouse?
When they come back, based on the contractual agreement, they get paid 4 hours for coming back for a callback.
Okay, good. So if it only takes 90 minutes, then they're free to go after those 90 minutes.
Correct. What the stipulation is, once that ambulance comes back, if another vehicle is out, they cannot be released from their recall until the full complement of staffing for that day has returned to quarters and is available.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification.
Thanks. And just so that I make sure I understand correctly, the reason why the miscellaneous technical services line item was higher than it was in the budget is because calls were up, so collections were up, so the fee that we have to pay them is up.
That's correct, yes.
Okay. Well, good enough. I'd entertain a motion to recommend this one to the full council.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0. Okay, and this one is a $33,000 appropriation for injured on duty fire medical expense. Chief, I think you're up for this one too.
I'd be happy to speak on it on his behalf, because it's kind of like a joint appropriation. So it comes out of the fire department accounts, but really gets kind of managed through ours. Yeah, absolutely. So every year we have the injured on duty, which is the workers' compensation for fire and police. what we do with our insurance company is in previous years, we would have a $10,000 deductible. Once we would hit that deductible, we were then held still liable to keep on paying, and then we would be reimbursed, and that reimbursement would then go into general fund. So we had some claims from fiscal year 2023 that are still open and still have medical bills accruing from that year. So they're considered prior year claim expense. So that's where we calculated based off of what we have already put out and then what we anticipate to have come in for these claims in the next couple months.
Okay, so it's an old bill.
Yeah.
Well, not much we can do about that.
Yeah.
Any questions? I would entertain a motion to recommend this one to the full council.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. All right, Chief Norris, I think that's all the fire ones. So if I'm not mistaken, you are off the hook.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to turn to the police now. We have a $312,479.75 appropriation. This is going to be going to police base pay, 96,000 approximately. Police overtime, 109. Police education incentive, 22. Police EMT incentive, 6. Police holiday pay, 4.7. Police sick leave, 36. Police unused vacation, 19. So that's just personnel services. And then we've got police expense, 2.4 thousand. Police uniform expense, 9.4. Police education and training, 6.4. So, Lieutenant, would you like to sort of walk us through this?
Sure. So, beginning with the unforeseen contractual payouts due to the retirement of Captain William Kelly, and then the resignation of 3 officers with the payout of comp time, the accrued vacation, and the accrued sick time expense comes to the $59,944.45. Regarding our police contractual increases in the wage realignment, that was for 8 supervisors, the 6 sergeants and 2 lieutenants. The wage realignment that took place in August of last year up until June of this year, so the 10 months at the wage realignment to account for the $125,009.34. In terms of overtime expenses, we had unanticipated expenses due to the attrition of 4 officers, delays in hiring of 4 replacement officers, the filling of beats for 2 officers attending the police academy, and then 1 officer on light duty, along with minimal special officers available to work, and the post-reform bill and requirements that resulted in the unanticipated overtime of $109,250. And then finally, the police academy tuition, uniforms, equipment, the medical and psychological exams for the 5 new full-time officers that we hired, that all of those, the exams and everything came to a total of $18,275.96 for that $312,479.75 total.
Okay. So to summarize, make sure that I understand this correctly. It sounds like the bulk of this is either a result of new contracts that have been signed since our last budget, or officers leaving, either resigning or retiring, and then new people being hired, or overtime that had to occur in the meantime because there was a vacancy.
Correct. 4 to attrition, 1 light duty, and then the replacement of those officers with the overtime.
When you say light duty,
1 of our officers is pregnant.
oh, well, there you go. Okay. Counselors, any questions?
Well, just clarification. So
with those two new officers that were hired, so while even though they're hired, they're in the academy, you're still paying them as well as paying. Correct.
Cover
They're
shift
receiving
themselves.
their
Okay.
pay, and then we have to cover the shift for the minimums that the shift they would be assigned to. It's difficult to anticipate a retirement, so you have to wait for the retirement to occur before we can actually hire, and so there's not that overlap
Well, then once you hire, you still have a lot of overlap while they're in the academy.
to cover the academy beats. Correct.
Wish my job sent me to academy.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Grad school?
Well, no, well, I guess they kind of are now. Now you mention it, yeah. Good point. But not for my bachelor's.
Okay, that's fair.
No, okay, yeah, that makes sense. I don't have any further questions, so, I would entertain a motion to recommend this to full council. So. Motion a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion passes 3-0. On over here. I think the next one, we got this $35,998.45 for IT. Karen, would you like to?
There's three main components. The first one is for two cybersecurity monitoring and protection systems. We are able, as a municipality, we're able to receive services from the Center for Internet Security. And one of them, I think that is the one that is $16,000 we pay annually, is for the Albert Network Monitoring System. Is an equipment that we have connected in our firewall, and the Center for Internet Security has security specialists monitoring constantly 24/7 the traffic on our network. There is no way we could do that here in IT. We don't have the experience. It's just, it must be done. And it's a service that we didn't know existed. We couldn't anticipate for it. So when it became available, I ran to the mayor's office and I said, I need it. I need to sleep a little bit better at night. Please, let's move forward and do this one. And in the same line is another one that is only $2,400 because we're 200 users, employees, for the malicious domain blocking reporting class that gives us instant feedback of any suspicious activity on the network. And they help us also troubleshoot what is a false positive, so it gives us real information. The Albert, we don't see what's happening in there. It goes directly to them. This one, we get a better view of what our users are experiencing.
Okay.
And again, we didn't anticipate meeting them, but when we learn about them.
So you didn't anticipate because you weren't aware that these services were available, but when you became aware of them, yeah, okay.
Yes. The other one, the $9,400 is for the fire department software conversion. The fire department moved from Ambu Pro to ESO and to a cloud-based system that is a better system, but we just did, and the cost is the difference is $5,000 with Ambu Pro. We didn't know, we knew it was going to happen. We didn't know it was going to happen this year. And we were surprised with the bill. So we were coming here to ask for the money. And in addition to that, we also needed to keep the old Ambu Pro for reporting purposes for another year. And at the beginning, initially, we thought we needed to keep that system for 7 years because we're required to keep the system running for 7 years at $4,000 a year. And the company wasn't going to give us that data. So, you know, it's a learn that when we sign a contract with a software company, we need to make sure that we own the data and we can get it back. So it was a fight. We were able to get the data out, and after we are now not paying anything to Ambu Pro and we have the data. But that's that big deal. And the other one, our main copier, scanner, and printer broke down. And we have a service with a company that helps us keep it running. but because of the supply and COVID and the budget and what was happening in the country, that we couldn't get supplies. They didn't know when the piece that was needed to replace the copier was going to arrive. And we just couldn't hold it any longer. We went an entire week, 2 weeks without it, and it just created a lot of dysfunction in the office. So we went ahead and purchased another one. So the old one, the piece arrived, it's now working. We moved it into the collector's office where they do a lot of printing and it's being well used. But, was something that in other situations, we would just wait, but we didn't know it was going to be a month, 2 months, a year when this piece was going to arrive.
Makes sense to me. Any questions?
I have a question, and I'm going to speak from professional work environment. So, and I'm just trying to understand your contract, right? Your copier contract. So at UMass, they just switched out dozens and dozens and dozens of copiers around the campus that were perfectly fine, right? And this was a contract that they had with a company, and then the reason that they did it was because it's cheaper for the company just to switch all out new copiers, because if they break down, then that's service time, they have to come, they have to repair, there's parts they have to order that maybe aren't available, et cetera, right? Now, is this the type of contract that we have, or is that, because I hear you saying it's breaking, and that kind of?
So, well, remember I worked at UMass, so the amount of printers that you can look for services is different. We have one main copier here, maybe one main copier in COA and safety.
Mhm.
So we don't have the power to bring the prices down.
Mhm.
And in all honesty, what we do is we try to see what makes more sense
Mhm.
to keep. So there are printers and copiers that they don't even offer you support. So we go for how many pages do they cover for free with the contract of supporting toner versus we need to replace it.
Mhm.
So sometimes we buy the copier, sometimes we lease the copier.
Mhm.
So what happened now, because we didn't want to keep two copiers moving forward, the old one that was on a lease, we said, can we buy that? And we bought that one. We have it. When it breaks, we're going to get rid of it.
Okay.
But now we're leasing a new one. So it's really one by one. At some point, it may be a good idea to connect with the schools and do something together.
Mayor.
Oh, we can't do that. So schools have special pricing, and we did look at that, copiers and printers. So the schools have a different E-rate program that, just like our internet,
Yep.
where we thought we could get in on their rates, and it's very separate. Because exactly that, we looked at it of this makes sense. Look at all the copiers schools have, and let's do one city contract. And under procurement law and the benefits that schools get, a lot of things for free and deeply discounted. The city does not. So you can't use the leverage of the school to get a better deal for the city. We've tried several times.
The school, for example, is replacing many printers and copiers now. And Justin just sent an email saying, I have all this toner. I'm not sure what I'm going to do with that. Can you use it? But, we may be able to use some of that, but we have different brands and different models. And
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Here's my phone. I know that we've entered into partnerships with municipalities for other things like this. Is IT or this type of stuff, is this a possibility so that municipalities can kind of join forces to be able to kind of help taxpayers keep costs down?
good idea.
Yeah, so some of that opportunity went away for Easthampton because the Hampshire county government that did a lot of bulk purchasing disbanded and only they spun off certain solar is now its own thing or whatnot. So we've lost that opportunity. There are some opportunities to do exactly that with Franklin regional governments, and we do a lot of that, especially around highway and DPW and whatnot. Right now, the opportunity to aggregate or whatnot, like we would have to create a sub-region, kind of like what we've done, and it gets it's kind of like pens. Everybody has a favorite pen. It's amazing. They will fight for that extra $35 in their budget to get their pens. And people like their printers and they like their copiers. And when you start with, we need 2 Caseros and 2, it falls apart quickly.
Sure.
So it's possible and probably makes really good sense. We do get somewhat of a better deal when we stay on the state rate list, but it's not great.
And all the companies that we interact with are part of the IT contract. So the state contract comes to an agreement of what are the services you provide and what are the prices are a little bit down, but still.
No, you know.
Yeah, I would just, and the other big thing, which would actually be a really big thing for Easthampton to get into that agreement, we are 80%, 90% a Google Workplace city, and that is rare. And so when you're talking about printers and software and everybody talking to each other, it's different if you're a Microsoft based city with Outlook and stuff like that. And there are a couple of other systems, but mostly. So it gets a little, it gets more challenging. Like the little challenges start building up, and then it's like, how do you make that regional agreement make? It just becomes a headache that it's just not that much. I hate to say this in finance, it's not that much of an impact on our overall budget.
I just know these things are expensive, right?
Every dollar is important, and I appreciate all your votes, but I would like to see them in a positive direction. However.
Well, I don't have any further questions. Does anybody else? Entertain a motion to recommend this appropriation to the full council.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Good to see you both.
Thank you.
Good to see you all.
See you soon.
You as well.
I don't know.
Thank you.
Oh, I was gonna say, you don't need to stick around.
I don't want to interrupt once you started the next one. Trying to be respectful. Have a good night.
You too. Okay, next up, we have $115,000 for the purchase of 2 Ford F-150 hybrid trucks.
John couldn't make it tonight. The reason, basically we are still working on a lease deal to make sure it's advantageous, but the age of the trucks at Park and Rec are beyond, like, it's just, even if we were to buy F-350 diesels, it would be a help to the environment. And John was able to find some hybrid trucks. We're hoping to get Rangers, which are a little smaller and honestly right size for Park and Rec, and they weren't available. We found 2 F-150s. He found 2 F-150s that are hybrid. Given the amount of mileage that are put on the trucks, they might be the last 2 trucks Park and Rec ever buys in my lifetime. And also to say to that, we might have an opportunity in the future to trade them in and go to an all electric or hydrogen or whatever happens in the future. But the impact and the repair bills were just so mounting. It was time to do it now. So they have been waiting a long time for these trucks. And, it would have been hard it's hard to rationalize leasing trucks for Park and Rec, given the low impact that they put on them. And the F-150s do give us an option to put some heavier equipment on the front of them. Should we, need a plow truck and get through. Just saying.
Okay.
I don't know.
For example. Okay.
I'm sorry, what was your
I'm sorry.
comment? What was your comment?
In case park was still open year round,
Yes.
snowplow would be beneficial.
Yes.
Well, you never know when you might need a snowplow.
Yeah.
That makes enough sense to me. Does?
I just have a comment. I'm really happy about this for
Yeah.
a couple of reasons. One, I've seen those trucks or vehicles that have mentioned. And I'm also very aware that they've had to use their own vehicles, personal vehicles, to kind of get around. And so I'm glad that the city is taking the responsibility of providing those vehicles to them. So I just want to acknowledge that.
Okay. Anything else? I'll entertain a motion to recommend this appropriation to the full council.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Next up, we've got $45,000 for FY24 city Medicare costs.
Yes. Last year when we did the budget, the pay plan scale was modified kind of during that process. So the request for the Medicare was a little low.
Okay. Makes sense. I remember that happening.
Yep.
So,
So that for this year's budget, I did this amount, then the 3% for next year. So hopefully we won't have this issue then.
okay. Any questions?
I appreciate your brevity.
I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. All in favor? Aye. All right. Next up, we've got $7,000 for payroll processing. 4,000 of that's for city payroll processing. 3,000 is for school payroll processing.
Yeah, so it's kind of the same issue. Last year when doing the budget, the fees weren't in for Harper's. They came in July, I think, the new increased fees. So this will get us through this year and next year should be fine.
Okay. Any questions? I'll entertain a motion to approve this.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor? Aye. 3-0. Okay, now we've got 17,000 for FY24 school liability premium expenses.
It's gonna be me. So we had the new school added mid-year during fiscal year 23 to the insurance. So it was a little hard to calculate out what the insurance premium for the new school was gonna be this fiscal year. So the $17,000 is just that, we couldn't calculate perfectly what the expense was gonna be, and that it was a little bit more than anticipated. So.
Okay, I'm sorry. I feel like I just
No, that's okay.
Could you just say that first part again? I feel like
Yeah,
something just
so
went
we had the
straight over
new
my head.
school added, I think it was like January of fiscal year 23 to insurance. So the city took on the insurance liability for the school midway through the year. And then, so when we were calculating costs for the liability insurance for this fiscal year, it was hard to calculate because we didn't know how much it was going to be for a full year's premium of the new school.
Okay,
So we fell a little bit short in the calculation, or I fell a little bit short in the calculation.
I see.
That was $17,000. So,
Okay,
does that make sense?
it does now.
Okay, sorry.
I wasn't immediately sure if you were talking about this being something to do with like the opening of Mountain View School and then that whole thing, or whether it was about the fact that we absorbed the
Because we
old
have-
schools. So now it
No,
makes
no,
sense
the
to
new
me.
school.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. Any questions? Resolution? All right, I would entertain a motion to recommend this to the full council.
So moved.
Second.
All right, I got a motion in a second. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. Okay, and now we've got $600,000 for the tax rate stabilization fund. Mayor, it's been a while since we've discussed this fund. I know that at least we have one new member of our committee, and there might be people watching who are unfamiliar. Could you sort of just give a summary of how this fund works? And
Yeah, so this is his first specifically created fund to give the city an opportunity to take some of the tax burden off of taxpayers because of higher values. We saw, we really heard that taxes were going up, the number, it's $14.65 or whatnot. It sounds great as a tax rate, except all the property in town is going up very quickly. And we've heard that along with, the excluded debt. So this is an opportunity to put money towards the end of the year into an account that lessens what we have to raise off of the taxpayers. I did not think or even know about this. I will courtesy to the auditor and finance team of this as a tool. I'm a huge proponent of it because it gives every taxpayer a break. And it's a break on the tax bill. There's no income qualification or type of project. We have one tax rate, and across the board, everybody gets a break. And we've been able, as we watch our values go up, and I am concerned about a reevaluation year next year, this is a great way to just help taxpayers. We try to make it as part of the annual budget, kind of like the contributions to stabilization in both general and capital. You see it before you now, before other stabilization votes, just because people's pocketbooks are pinched. It's tough, and it allows us, the city, to do something to help with that burden in the face of electricity and supplies, and as you hear the reasons for some of these appropriations, it's no different, certainly no different in my house, and I'm assuming the rest. So it's a really, we're limited by just our budget and expenses to provide wider tax relief programs to folks who may be carrying a heavy financial burden because of decreasing income. But we can get everybody something by utilizing this account.
Councilors, any questions?
Just again, comments. I think we have a large aging population, right? We have a lot of houses out of reach of young families, etc. So I think it's a really great way to be able to provide some support to the community who, without this, even though it might be not as significant as they wish it would be to kind of help cut their taxes, it certainly is an effort, I think, to ease that burden. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, if you look at the breakdown of who owns property, it is pretty amazing how most of it overwhelmingly is residential. But when you start looking at who owns, and even the people who own a rent, there are a lot of people who own a home still. While finding an apartment in Easthampton is very difficult, a lot of these houses are multi-family, they're multi-generational. Like, this relief goes to directly to property owners, and hoping it helps renters. But that really surprised me when the idea was brought forward to me of just who owned what, and primary, house owners living in the houses, and how that can be helpful.
Okay. Well, I will entertain a motion unless there's anything else.
So moved.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to recommend this to the full council. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And finally, we have $15,000 for FY24 legal costs.
Yeah, I mean, so this is an appropriation that council sees randomly, but definitely you'll continue to see them where we're not super sure what the exact cost of something will be or what litigation might be coming the city way. We're fortunate in that as far as liability or claims against the city, we have a city attorney and a labor attorney that's very proactive. We spend the money up front to see what we can do about the claim, really investigate it and whatnot, but also we have larger street projects. So this is a great example of there's something before property right now to ask to pay for easements and takings and whatnot. We've asked for an amount that's a good like pencil number because who knows what that property is going to, what we'll have to pay for it. Some people donate. A part of this is not, is that there were more legal costs looking at takings. When you have a street as old as we have, figuring out who owns what and where the sidewalk was and where it's a deep dive. I mean, it's just hard to check. Sometimes it's really simple because the property owner has like bought the land more recently and had to clear the title, and it's, you know, in that, so it's a, you know, I like to, I mean, hold on to that money as much as I can for free cash and stabilization and funding those sort of things and seeing where we go with legal. And, you know, sometimes it's over, sometimes it's not. I will say that there will be more appropriations in the coming fiscal year with, depending on what grant money we get for, that we'll need for legal review contracts, not to mention stuff that, you know, just basic contracts or ordinances, so.
Any questions? I just want to say, I feel like this has been coming to us less and less often over my time in the council. And I know you've detailed many of the things you've done to help get that under control, but I do appreciate it.
Yes, no, thank you. And we've gotten a little more savvy with our grant writing.
Mm-hmm.
So when we have, like, we're able not to cover all the legal costs with the grant a lot of times, but we know now that we can get some money into that grant and not have to sacrifice admin or design.
Great. Okay, well, I would entertain a motion to recommend this to the full council.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Motion passes. And that's the last one. So I would, unless there's anything else, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion second. All in favor? Aye.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.